welcome to my new governor prediction, and let's start. And for some big news from California, Harris will likely announce her bid to be the next governor of California, and she will likely do it by the end of the summer, according to Politico, and this will easily go to her because of the partisanship of the state, and she easily would win here. Depends on a lot of issues, but at least 15, could be as high as 25%. That's it for the safe states for the first likely state. In a race that barely went Democrat back in 2022, Kotek, the incumbent governor of Oregon, is in a bit of trouble, but thankfully for her state is very much liberal, so she's probably gonna win here by, I'm guessing, like 10 to 12%. But if she was in a more competitive race, this could easily go to the GOP. But because of how liberal Oregon is, she's not gonna have a problem. Even if her approval ratings are quite in the mud, she still is in Oregon. So yeah, like I said, 11% victory for Democrats here. For Illinois, and likely 2028 Democrat candidate J.B. Pritzker is likely gonna run for a third term, which is very big in Illinois politics. And the main thing really here is who's gonna be the GOP nominee. We already have someone declared called James Mendrick, DuPage County Sheriff. There's also Aaron Del Mar, actually ran for lieutenant governor in 2022 but didn't get that. Richard Porter, Jen Ives, either way, most people are putting this as safety, but because of how much the electorate rejected big city politics in 2024, I mean, it only went in the presidential level to Harris by 10.9%, and that's with some RFK voters, almost kind of like splitting the vote for Trump. And in the last election with Pritzker, like I've said before, a blue puddle that saw a lot of Democrats win easily because of Roe v. Wade being overturned. Pritzker barely won by a safe margin, and with this being her third term, most likely, I don't see him doing quite well. Probably gonna be like 11% victory for the Democrats here, but this is something to look out for in the future, trends-wise. And now, or race, I should say, that's even closer. We gotta go with Iowa. So even though this was a heavy Trump state, the main issue for Reynolds, the incumbent, is that she's very much disliked because, like I said before, she went for DeSantis instead of Trump in the primaries. And we already have someone declaring that they're gonna try to primary her, called Brad Sherman, state representative back in the day. Probably gonna be a bit of a messy primary. I wonder who Trump's gonna endorse. Not looking too good for her, but she's lucky, just like Kotek, that her state is quite safe. And there's Democrat. The only one that can make this close is Rob Sand, and even him in 2026 will probably lose by a lean margin, which is very bad news for Iowa Democrats. It's not going to be safe far, but I'm going to say that Reynolds will win re-election by 8 to 10%. She might retire, wouldn't be surprised about that, but yeah, that's something to look out for. And now for Pennsylvania, the home state of a likely 2020 candidate, Josh Shapiro. In 2022, he won by an absolute landslide against a very mediocre candidate, Doug Mastriano. And in 2026, it looks like it might be the opposite because we got a decent chunk of good GOP candidates, Stacey Garrity, Dan Muser. Even though Doug Mastriano is teasing another bid for the governorship, I don't think he's going to be the nominee. Yeah, I don't think he's going to get the Trump endorsement. I think he's just doing that for publicity, to be honest with you. Probably going to be between Garrity and Dan Muser. We didn't have polling yet, but as you can see, Josh Shapiro is extremely popular, one probably like top 10 most popular governors. So he's on track to win by a decent margin. The GOP is quite lucky that they do have some decent candidates in the state of Pennsylvania that will make it so that it probably won't be safety. There's also a chance that it will be safety. Just depends on how the national environment will be in 2026. I'm gonna say Shapiro will win here by 8 to 10%, but if Doug Mastriano wins the nomination, safety. And now for New Hampshire, not too much to say here, but with incumbency being on Kelly Ayotte's side, I think she's gonna do okay. I think the environment does kind of screw her over. It could have been even bigger margin of victory if Kamala won. I don't think she's gonna win by 9 points. I mean, there's a shot. I think she's just narrowly gonna underperform that margin because of the national environment. It being a Trump midterm is gonna be tougher for the Republicans, but I'm gonna say she wins here by 7 to 9%. So yeah, barely underperforming. Basically, if she wasn't incumbent, I think this would be lean R, but she gets to 8%. For New Mexico, we have someone from the Biden administration running, and that is, of course, Deb Haaland, that she officially declared after literally like 5 weeks of teasing a governor bid. You also got Ken Miyagi-Shima, former mayor of Las Cruces, who's gonna probably announce quite soon in May. So yeah, that's going to make it harder for former Secretary of the Interior of Biden to win the primary easy. Well, for the GOP, this is more interesting. You got Greg Hall, who's really the most supported candidate. You also got Nakamura, former Chief Justice. And there's more candidates since the last video. They're slowly starting to pile in. Guessing Holt, the mayor of Rio Rancho, gets the nomination. It just really depends on who Trump will endorse in the end. This was a Kamala midterm. This would be a competitive race, especially with Holland, someone close to the Biden administration, but it does look like New Mexico will yet again elect another Democrat. I'm guessing Holland will win here by 6 to 8%, but my margin could drop down if her campaign trail strategy is not good and maybe even similar to Biden's. Who knows, but yeah, Democrat won here by 7%. And now for Minnesota, the home state of Tim Walz, who almost ran for Senate, but is staying to run for a third term because his lieutenant governor kind of took his spot. But yeah, that's for the Senate video. Yeah, Tim Walz probably going to run for a third term. He's going to decide at the same time as Kamala if he's going to run for governor. We also got Angie Craig, which is really interesting. I still think she will only run if Walz doesn't run, even though I think she might run for Senate instead. In my opinion, it wouldn't really make sense if Walz runs and Angie Craig runs. It'd be kind of awkward. GOP, you got Ducksworth, Hahn, who have been publicly interested, which is the new updates from last video. You also got maybe Lisa, Maddell. Still, it looks like Minnesota will yet again vote for the Democrats, which is not surprising because especially in the Trump midterm, it's going to go for the Democrats. I'm not sure how Walz will do. I wouldn't be surprised if he underperforms bigly from 2024. I think Democrats will win here by 6 to 8%. And now we can move on to Kansas, which hasn't had that much happen, to be honest with you, which is very bad news for Democrats. They actually do have a Democrat governor, which is really crazy because this is a Trump 16th state. Laura Kelly won in 2018 because of the blue wave and GOP having a bad candidate, and yet again won in 2022 because of Roe v. Wade essentially helping her with abortion voters. I was expecting Tolan to announce a governor bid by now, but it is looking more and more unlikely that he's going to run for governor, which is really going to be a big blow for Democrats. There's still time, bear in mind, but the more he waits, the more harm and easier it will be for the GOP to flip this governorship. I'm going to guess that Trump endorses Schwab. There's many candidates that could happen, but no matter what happens, there's a shot that maybe Democrats could hold this if this is a gigantic blue wave, but I doubt that. I think that's going to be the time that Kansas governorship goes from the Democrats and flips to the GOP, changes the margin from lean R to likely R because no changes and just the vibes I'm getting. Whoever Trump endorses will win here by 5% just on the dot. Let's go to Nevada. Joe Lombardo, the incumbent, is quite popular, not extremely popular, but he's doing quite good. And Democrats only got Aaron Ford. No new changes here. From the vibe I'm getting, it does seem like the 2026 midterms are going to be favorable for the Democrats, especially if the economy is not as good as tariff scare, and that if that does continue, maybe we'll go into a mini recession or something like that. And if the economy has that fear going, if it's worse than now, come November 2026, I could even see maybe it going down to tilt. But I'm going to say that because of the incumbency part, Joe Lombardo will narrowly win by a likely margin, even though it is getting tempting to put this and dragging it down to lean R. I'm going to say Lombardo will win here by 4 to 6%, but yeah, something to look out for. And for some big news from Alaska, actually. So if you follow community posts, you will know that Mary Peltola has hinted and told sources in Politico that she will likely run for governor of Alaska. And this is very big because governorships are less partisan, and she does have a solid chance of maybe becoming the next governor of her state, even though Nancy Donald Trump's probably going to be that GOP nominee. Do you think her running for her old seat would be her best chance at a political comeback? But if the blue wave is big enough, I do think Mary Peltola could just write it off and into a victory. Even though this drops down from safe R all the way to lean R, I'm going to guess that the GOP will still narrowly win, but with ranked choice voting, this being a Trump midterm, this could be a dark horse race for Democrats to flip in 2026. And yeah, I would say you should keep an eye on Alaska because this could be a race that could flip for Democrats that not as many people are talking about, but still, it's Alaska. Went for Trump by what, 13-15% in 2024, 3% victory for the GOP for now, but could maybe flip for the Democrats. And for a similar race that is going to be very close, we can move on to Ohio. So in Ohio, you have a really close Trump ally, Vivek Ramaswamy, running for governor in 2026, and not only is he running, but he already got the Trump endorsement, which basically tells us he already has a foot in the governorship. While for the Democrats, they have a few decent good candidates. The main one is really Amy Acton, former director of Health Department in Ohio. But most importantly, we could see a comeback into politics from former senator of Ohio, Sherrod Brown, who I think seeing a candidate like Vivek Ramaswamy, who will not be that strong in a non-Trump election, which is a Trump midterm as well, will probably take advantage of this, and instead of running again for Senate, he will probably run for governor. He could also still not run at all and just retire, which could happen. And I think this race will be very close, even closer than Alaska perhaps. Here's the issue though. This state is quite red. It went to Trump. It went to Trump by almost 12%. And even though it's a Trump midterm, I still think that the state is too red. And Vivek Ramaswamy will win here barely by 3%. And now we can move on to, let's go to Michigan. So in Michigan, there's a lot of news. First of all, Jocelyn Benson is leading from the early polls we've seen in the primary, which makes sense since she's Secretary of State, so a lot of people have seen her name, probably at the DMV. And recently, in the last week, Jill Crist announced he's also running to succeed Gretchen Whitmer, Lieutenant Governor, but he is quite tall, but as I'm saying, Benson probably will be the Democrat nominee. Pete Buttigieg declined running for governor and Senate, but it does look like he will run for president, but that's for another video. The GOP primary also has a lot of news. First of all, Perry Johnson, who I just saw, is actually maybe interested in running for governor, which makes sense. Tudor Dixon, who lost bigly in 2022, is thinking of maybe running for Senate or governor, and yeah, she lost by 11% because of the Dobbs abortion decision, but she wasn't the best at that, so she would really be one of the worst nominees in my opinion. She should just be managing the GOP and go from that. Apart from that, you also got a bunch of nominees, so you got Mike Rogers, who is probably going to run for governor, most likely to get the Trump endorsement in my opinion. You also got, John James, I think probably the second most likely to get the Trump endorsement. But as you can see, it's very close, and it all really comes down to if Mike Duggan will stay in the race. I still think he will stay and run as an independent candidate, and that will really hurt Democrats, and that's really why the margin, I will tell you in just a second, leans towards the GOP. I think that as long as Duggan is still running, I think the GOP will narrowly win this governorship and flip it. But if Duggan drops out, or if Dixon is a nominee, I could also see Democrats winning here easily, even with a third party like Duggan. Either a lean margin or a likely margin, but for right now, I barely have this as a lean margin victory for the GOP by 1 to 3%. And now for another Rust Belt state in a race that is very close and very dependent on incumbent running. Let's go to Wisconsin. It is March and we're still waiting for Tony Evers to announce if he's going to run for re-election, but that's something to look out for in the coming months. New additions for potential candidates is actually Ben Wickler. I think he got second or third place in the Democratic DNC for chairman. So maybe he runs for governor if Tony Evers decides to call it quits. There's a lot of candidates. The Gutluski probably the best one here. If Evers decides to call it quits. GOP candidates, we got Eric Hovde, who is teasing a governor bid because of how close he got to winning in 2024, as you can see, barely losing to Tammy Baldwin, who is a decent candidate. So yeah, he got very close and actually did quite good. Cleaver, she might run. She should probably run, but I'm not sure she will get the Trump endorsement. Pollsters have this as a toss-up, and that is fair. It just really depends on a bunch of things. If Evers runs, the national environment, who Trump endorses, and as long as Tony Evers runs for re-election, this will be lean D, but if he doesn't, this will go into the toss-up category. But for now, I'm going to have this, I should say 0.75% to 2.75%, yeah. And now let's go to Georgia. We have some big news, actually. So finally, someone formed a committee to likely run for governor, and that is Lucy McBath. She is an S-tier candidate. It's probably like an A/B tier. S-tier will be Jason Carter, grandson of Jimmy Carter, as many of you know. Stacey Abrams, F tier. I don't think she will run, but we will see if she actually does. But because you know what happened last time she ran for governor, even 2018 she couldn't win. So if she runs, she loses. Not much about her. Lucy McBath, she's okay, like I said. And if the blue wave is big enough, she could win. It just really would depend on if it's basically 2018 2.0, and that's the way I could see McBath winning. I think Chris Carr, our close ally to Brian Kemp, is probably going to be the nominee. I mean, MTG would lose easily, by the way. Basically, a reverse Stacey Abrams. But I'm going to say that the GOP will win here. I'm going to drop the margin from lean R to tilt R. Bear in mind, there is no runoff for governors in Georgia, FYI. And I think whoever the GOP nominates, as long as it's not MTG, will barely win here by under 1%, aka 0.75%. And now for Arizona. In Arizona, the state that went to Trump by a likely margin of 5%, you have a Democrat governor who's probably going to run for re-election. And I think she will. If she doesn't, Democrats are kind of screwed here. But I think she will, so yeah. The main issue for the GOP here that could come here is really the primary, because you got Robson, a very electable candidate who already was endorsed by Trump. But Andy Biggs, a couple of weeks later, announced that he's also running, and most importantly, he's getting almost all the endorsements from people in Congress, except for Trump, which is the main one. Which is, yeah, this is going to be a very close primary. Andy Biggs is the more Trumpy candidate, unironically, but he's the less electable candidate because Robson would get more independent voters and more of those old school Republicans. And Libertarian, also something to look out for. Most importantly, here's some polls. So as you can see, it's very much close. This is really going to depend a lot on how the economy is, how the approval that Trump has. And those are, I think Trump's approval is going to be probably going to be 45-ish. I'm guessing by 2026. It really depends on the economy. Although Hobbs has been quite the opposite of being reluctant, and she's not helping the Trump administration with migration, and I think her being so liberal and that could really make the GOP narrowly win in Arizona. It's very close. I think if Robson is the nominee, she wins, but I think if Biggs is the nominee, I think the Democrats will narrowly hold on yet again in Arizona, but it's going to be very close. I mean, as you can see, in the last time that there was an election in Arizona, it barely won for Hobbs, but yeah, this is almost a toss-up territory, but I'm going to say that Republicans narrowly won here by under 1%, 0.75%. And now for New York. In the Big Apple state of New York, you have a lot of news. So first of all, Kathy Hochul, the incumbent governor, actually got rid and basically disbarred her lieutenant governor's powers because she fears that Antonio Delgado will try to primary her in 2026, and he's already a potential candidate that could maybe replace her. Furthermore, you also have Richie Torres, who may try to primary Kathy Hochul because of how unpopular she is, and the main problem is that she's very uncharismatic, and she just basically comes off as your elitist Democrat. And most importantly, also I should say, lieutenant governor is going to be a big thing for Hochul, and if she wants to win the primary, there's a lot of candidates. She might actually pick, what's her name? Oh yeah, she might actually pick Letitia James. I wouldn't be surprised about that. Who knows? I mean, anyone in politics, even though it says decline, if you give them a shot at climbing the political ladder, they will try to hold on to it. And for the Republican primary, it just basically comes down to if Mike Lawler will run for governor. He has hinted that he will run for governor, saying that, yeah, he might succeed Hochul, but he hasn't announced yet, and he should announce soon, or else it's going to be harder for the GOP to flip this kind of heavy Democratic state. For Kathy Hochul, I still think she will narrowly win the primary. If she doesn't, and someone else wins it, it's going to be probably the same margin as 2022. If she does somehow win the primary, which I think she will because of her ties to the establishment, I think it's going to be tilt D, very close, and very much an embarrassing low, close margin for the Democrats here in probably the most close race in this cycle. And as you can see, the GOP have a majority in the governorships with 29 seats, while the Democrats hold on to 21 seats. As always, let me know what your map looks like. Feel free to leave a like and join the Discord and the channel membership, and have a good rest of your day.